platforms and make sure we're stable.
Sure.
And so YouTube should have just went live. And now I'm going to go live here on Facebook. This is probably a big mistake. And if it doesn't go well, I'll shut off the YouTube stream. I probably shouldn't even be trying it because I'm basically pulling down traffic, uploading at the same time, and I'm just like really stressing the network. Let me see. We should be ready to go in a minute. I'm gonna make a description, vomit up the you gotta
you just crap it out.
Yeah, you gotta have a little fun with the title sometimes. You know, Matrix, not Matrix Mathematics. I want to tag it. There we go. Tag it the right way, Matrix. All right, so now we should be going live on Facebook. Oh man. Coffee is the only thing that keeps me alive, brother. It's the only thing that keeps me going. Let me see. All right. We should be live now. And is that it gives people a chance to join. I love my technology. I like all my buttons and features. And old geek guy. So I appreciate talking to you. You understand the whole pocket protector thing.
Oh yeah.
All right, let me see. How come I don't see the Facebook comments? I still don't see them. Oh, come on. Okay. So I may have to delete that and retry that. I don't see any Facebook comments. All right. So let me try. Oh, no, there we go. Oh, there we go. Oh, the people were just slow. All right. Welcome, everybody. We are here for an episode of What is the Status of the Left, Right, and the Blue Pill? Did they vomit up the blue pill yet? We need to save. We have a world to save. We have a species to save. We have a country to save. We have a whole lot of things to save. And it's only going to happen if we can get the left and the right to vomit up that nasty blue pill and swallow the red one. Get back on the same side. All right. It looks like, Brother Carl, we are good. So I'm here with Brother Carl Kaiser. It's been a little bit that we've had a conversation. Brother, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Good, good. How's everybody in the room today? Can you guys hear us? Can we get some thumbs up or some hearts or something to know that you guys can hear us both loud and clear? I'm stressing my network a little bit, and before the net neutrality police get here, I want to make sure you guys can hear us well. Right. Offline, I see people saying, hey, Carl, and all types of comments. I see, okay, thumbs up and hearts. Okay, I'm going to take that to mean that they can hear us. All right, I even see Brother Carl, you joined. That's a good thing. So, Carl, I think you and I are of a like mind. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, we both have family and friends on the left and the right. People we love and respect. People who we can't figure out how they ended up where they are, perhaps, but we're both talking on both sides, and we're trying to diagnose how we got here and how do we get people to vomit up that blue pill so they can come back to unselective intellectual land. And so I just kind of wanted to have a quick conversation with you. Maybe, I don't know, quick, we'll see how it goes. But what are your thoughts? Like, what are you thinking in terms of, are you seeing people pulling from the extreme left? Are you seeing people pulling back from the extreme right? Are we making any progress in bringing down the extremity and bringing people back to a common place and rejoining the collective?
Well, I guess if you talk about it from extreme left or extreme right, usually people got to get pulled in from, like, the extreme left gets pulled in from the near left, and the extreme right gets pulled in from the near right. you know, when they're extreme, they're so wary of the other side. It's like the left isn't going to pull back the extreme right, and so on. So they kind of got to resolve it in their own on their own side, so to speak.
So maybe what does that mean? That there was you had the red pill and the blue pill, and obviously they swallowed the blue pill. But there are those who swallowed the blue pill and maybe drank a whole bunch of water and washed it deep, deep, deep down. It's going to take a little longer to throw it and vomit it up. And there are others maybe who just kind of swallowed it and kind of got stuck in the neck a little bit, stuck in the throat. And so I see what you're saying. It's easier to pull people back who didn't completely swallow it and it's already being digested versus people.
Yeah, or if you're kind of on their side already, if you're on the, like I said, someone from the left, it's hard for them to pull back someone who's blue pilled from way off on the right, you know, partly because part of the whole blue pill thing is to exaggerate this left-right difference. You know, everybody on the right is a neo-Nazi, you know, white supremacist, right? Everybody on the left is like a communist.
Oh, they have to be.
So, you know, and that's part of the blue pill. And if you think that way, it's like, you know, you don't even see the other side as like a human being that you can talk to. So it's interesting how you see sometimes people who have been red-pilled, like, they often get this question like, what red pilled you? And it's interesting to hear these different narratives and stories about when something kind of clicked in people's head that, you know, all of a sudden I realized that this government account was bullshit, you know, boom, and it just turned my mind over. And then once you see that, as you know, then you're kind of wary about all these things and you get a more objective approach.
Wow. Wow.
I guess
is that coined? I've never heard that before. That is ingenious. What red pilled you? That is huge.
Maybe I see it more on the right, but you know, I mean, because I'm from the left, but I've been exploring more of the right, or I should say the red-pilled right, and I'm just amazed at how much common ground there is there, and also just goodwill and tolerance. You know, which of course, when you buy into the blue pill idea that the left and the right are at each other's throats, you think that there can't be any dialogue, there can't be any understanding. But once people get red pilled on both sides, there's a lot of sort of, well, how can you say? They realize that they've all been lied to one way or another.
Yeah.
And obviously there are still, you could say, ideological differences, and that people on the right maybe tend to promote individualism and minimal government. People on the left like a more of a collective approach or communal approach. You know, so there are differences that affect policy, but they also realize that the differences have been exaggerated and people have been made suspicious of each other and hateful even, you know. And once they get red pilled, there's a different attitude and there's a real tolerance. I mean, I'll give you one example. You know, people who supported Bernie Sanders recognize that the Democratic Party is not democratic and not really a party. You know, it's corrupt. And at the same time, the people who supported Trump when he got into office, immediately this attempt starts to overthrow him through the Russiagate stuff. And so they realize there's a certain corruption in the government too that's going after their guy. And so there's a sympathy there in a certain sense, where Sanders supporters were kind of cheated by their party, and people who supported Trump see the government or the so-called deep state going after Trump if he's not militaristic enough, or if he doesn't support TPP or whatever. You know, he obviously wasn't the preferred choice of the people who try to run the government. You know, Clinton was their choice. And so because of that, because his supporters see this sort of unfair game played against him, as Sanders supporters had against him, there's a kind of sympathy there, even though, you know, Sanders is socialistic and Trump supporters tend to be sort of minimal government types. We recognize there's a bigger corruption here. And so you can sort of put your ideological differences behind for now and kind of join together to take back control of the government, because we don't really have representative government. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line.
Right.
So, you know, if I'm a Sanders supporter and I think college should be a publicly funded venture, or you know, state colleges, it doesn't matter if my party is so corrupt that I can never let anybody who support that. You know, I got to back up and say, all right, we have to fix this system before I can even envision this policy that I would like and discuss it or debate it with someone else. So,
right. So the question I'm going to ask to the room, I like to kind of definitely keep it engaged, and we are reading the comments, is that what was your, if you're red pilled, what was your red pill moment? At what moment did you realize that both the left and the right have major issues, that neither the left should run this world, let alone the country, nor should the other side? So I'm curious as to what your red pill moments were. I think my red pill moment, for the most part, I grew up in a family where you had people on both sides. You were allowed to be a Republican back then and a Democrat, and you could, you know, argue, fuss, and fight. And after everyone was finished arguing, fussing, and fighting, they went back to being family. Like it just wasn't a knockdown, drag out. The world's going to end if they win, right? There were no real others. So I jumped back and forth. I was a Democrat. I was a Republican. I was an independent. I was green. I was Constitution Party. I was with the Tea Party in the very beginning before they got a little loopy. So I've been all over. But, you know, but the thing, I think my red pill moment, to be honest with you, probably is when I started working with children's rights. And I realized that the kids of all races are all getting screwed really hard by the Republicans and the Democrats, that they actually don't care about children. And I think that's my red pill moment, probably in following, reading the legislation and understanding how the Child Protective Services, it didn't fail, it was failed. How child custody battles after divorce, it didn't fail. The family court system, it was failed. It was profitable to enact child trafficking in America. And a lot of that actually came from the Democratic Party and the social engineering, but it was a strategy that the Republicans started, and the Democrats just did a better job at what they were doing. And so I think my red pill moment was the day I woke up and I read an article about a child that someone thought a foster, well, he was a boyfriend, and the mother, I forget the details of the case. Bottom line was he put the child in might right when they're right, but all too often, both are just too damn wrong. And that was my red pill moment. And ever since then, I do my best I can to listen to people in all the extreme areas and try to determine, you know, what is their gripe and what is the solution that can work for my other friends on the other side. And that's why I think you're kind of doing a similar thing.
Yeah. Well, before I mention one of my red pill moments, yeah, there's so much trouble with the child so-called protective services. There's a euphemism for you. You know, I mean, they use that sometimes to basically like political dissidents. They'll threaten to take your kids away. They'll say you're a cult member and all that shit. I mean, they'll use their ability to protect some children to threaten people by taking their own children away. And then, of course, as you always find, like how many, I think just last week there was another head of some child agency who was found to be engaged in pedophilia, you know. So people that prey on children use these agencies, you know, and these children, I mean, they have police protection. They have no parent to protect them. So they're really vulnerable because they're wards of the state. So the state can abduct them, they can drug them, they can do whatever they want, you know, and they're not really protected. So yeah, that's a big problem. You know, my red pill, I'm a little older. I think my first red pill, I would say, probably 25 years ago, reading about the banking system and how it works and realizing it's all a scam and that it's, you know, the Federal Reserve is not federal and that private, you know, oligarchical families, you know, dynastic families are immensely wealthy through manipulating all these transactions through the banking system. And that was sort of the beginning of it, you know, and it's funny how it kind of unravels once you get there, like, oh, well, what else am I being lied to about, you know, and if you look deeply enough, you find lies just about everywhere you look. So, I think for a lot of people, what I hear, and also me too, is, you know, 9/11, I mean, you don't have to have a theory about what did happen, but you can see that the government story doesn't make sense. So, you know, even JFK's assassination, I mean, that was always the same way where, you know, it's not a theory to say, well, this doesn't make sense. The government, what they're telling me doesn't make sense. That's kind of a just sort of basic logical analysis. So, but it started with me with sort of the banking and the finance system in the U.S. back in the early 90s. So, and then I would say also, like a lot of people, I voted for Obama in 2008, and boy, it didn't take me 2 years to realize he was more or less a fraud and wasn't really advocating for the people that he said he would, you know. And there's sort of two different aspects. Whatever your political ideology or your outlook, you expect the politician, if they run and say they're going to do that or fight for that, to do that. Whether I agree with someone on the right or the left, you know, like, okay, if Trump says I'm going to do ABC and I don't like ABC, well, if he does it, that's what he said he would do. But Obama, when he came into office, he didn't do the things he said he would do, and he sort of supported corporatism and banks. And although I was already red-pilled at the point, but you know, that was the beginning of my sort of end of confidence in the Democratic Party. So,
Yeah.
and that's another aspect to it. Like I say, because if we only have two parties and both of them are somewhat corporatist, then it kind of doesn't matter if you're more socialistic because you don't have a vehicle for that. So now you have to back up and say, well, how am I going to basically restore a representative government? And then I can talk about, well, this is my vision for society and it's socialistic or it's cooperative or collective, but otherwise, it doesn't really matter. If your government doesn't represent you, what your ideology is. So,
Right.
Unless you're a corporatist, then you luck out and it's representing you just because they like corporations.
Yes.
But,
And that's it. And I think that kind of is the point, is that it doesn't matter if the left or the right are in control. Neither one actually has any say in what any of their leaders do. Neither listens to them at all. And I think that might be a red pill moment for a lot of people because, the more presidents we have that turn on their people, the more they're saying, whoa, like, I mean, you're right about that. Obama was a red pill moment for a lot of people. Now, a lot of people are still scared to say that because they still have this whole, if you say anything about Obama, you're racist. They got that nonsense that's still going on. But I was actually on with Brother Chris talking about that earlier today. We have to break down that narrative. And so it makes me feel good to see a lot more minority folks standing up and making it okay to say, yeah, this guy was a sellout. This guy worked for the banks. This guy, he worked for the military industrial complex. He completely got in and changed. And so I think that fed in, but I was glad Obama was the president, like I said before, because that fed into the need for a Bernie, right? And Bernie, between, I think, Obama's promises and what he was allowed or not allowed to do, however people want to look at it, and Bernie popping up, that totally eviscerated the left. The left is in shambles. And now with the DNC and their and their lawsuit against Pikachu and the Loch Ness Monster and the Russians and everybody who altered their election, everyone except for them, I think that really is I'm hoping it's signifying the end of the DNC. And the Republicans, their party was already destroyed. I mean, and it was obvious their party was destroyed because they were only putting forward people that were extremely unpopular, that really didn't have any platform other than, hi, I'm Christian. I've never been to church in my life. Don't know what's in the Bible, but I'm Christian, right? And so people, they tossed that away. And so it made room for a Trump to come in. And I agree with you. He was a big FU. He was to the deep state, to the permanent state. And Hillary was going to go along with it. But I think she scared the permanent state. I think Hillary, as horrible and evil as I say she is every day and Sunday, she was a very intelligent woman. She is a very smart person, and she is highly dangerous. And I think they got that. So I think that they were, she was their pick. But I think Trump kind of got in on the fact that people didn't want Hillary. And I think she scared him. I think she did. I think as running the State Department for a while, I think she was able to make friends around the world. The Clintons are very smart. They're very deceitful and very smart. And I think she probably could have taken on the deep state if she wanted to, but she was already bought into it. So I think that's kind of how we got there. But the synergies between the left and the right now are amazing. I am seeing my friends on the left, like you said, they're moderates, the moderate left, and I'm seeing the moderate right agreeing on things like no gun control. I see them agreeing on states' rights, leave me alone. I see them agreeing on things like now that it's understood what the universal income is about, I see them agreeing on that and making corporations pay for that. So I'm seeing some really interesting things. I'm seeing, I think you mentioned earlier, I'm seeing my hardcore evangelistic conservative friends fudging a little bit and starting to kind of agree and accept this idea that we actually don't know everything, that these people who say they're Christian, who are leading things, they don't even know verses in the Bible. They barely can spell the people who are in it. And so I think they're leaning more towards spiritual and less away from, I know everything, I'm going to force you to live like me. And so I think I'm seeing some really interesting things.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too. I've discovered a few people on YouTube from the right, and it's interesting to watch their narratives and how they speak. And they've come more to the center, but you can tell that some of their followers are more farther to the right, and they have to try to balance that narrative and keep people in. And yeah, one thing I'm seeing is, one difficulty even with respect to religion generally is the idea that my religion is the only right way, it's the only truth, the only way of salvation, what have you. And I'm finding more people from the right who are more tolerant, first of all, and then even recognizing that, maybe a lot of religion traditionally is sort of doctrinaire, and maybe it's not all exactly true. Not every word is true. But it makes them more tolerant, and they sort of start to open up more to an idea of spirituality that's not religious. And I'm not saying religion per se is good or bad. I think it just depends on how people use it. But I'm just seeing more openness from the right. And that's just one example of where people were more polarized in the past, and that's breaking down, I think, which is really good. And actually, it's funny on the other side, and I observe this in our little society, like, with Debbie and Claudia and so on. A lot of people on the left tend to be atheistic, and I'm not knocking that one way or another, but it sort of depends on how you came to that. For example, if people had bad experience with religion in childhood, or maybe, a really heavy-handed Catholic upbringing or whatever. But people would tend to throw out religion altogether or be anti-spiritual, even though if religion and spirituality aren't the same thing, then rejecting one poorly implemented religion is not rejecting spirituality. But what I'm getting at is I'm finding more people on the left who kind of got a distance from religion, becoming more spiritual themselves and kind of making space for that, in their life. Although they're very wary and they don't want it to be associated with a formal religion or whatever. But so just as the right, maybe, and we're generalizing, of course, is becoming less doctrinaire and orthodox in their religion, people on the left who may be kind of orthodox about atheism are becoming a little open to spirituality and the idea that there might be something greater, even if it's not, the Old Testament per se, as it's written out. So,
right, and I have to agree, and I on the atheist side too. But most people, they just want to be left alone, right? We've said that for a while. Is most people, they really don't care how you lead your life. They want you to stay out of their life. And I think that's another big one. And that pushed us more back towards the state rights. My atheist friends, there are some that still, they look at me like I'm crazy when I say I'm Christian, but they understand where I'm coming from. They understand that for me, it's a personal belief. And my personal beliefs have no place in your life. And I have no interest of converting them. I have no interest of turning them. I have no interest of beating them over the head with things that I believe, not things I necessarily completely know for sure, in terms that they're supposed to be my religion or they'll burn in hell. I mean, even the Bible tells you you're not supposed to tell people that, because what is that whole parable? I'm gonna go back into my religion. I have to look and make sure Lisa's not. If Lisa's here, I'm gonna get in trouble. But I'm gonna say this real quick. But there's a parable in the Bible that says that, there are workers in the field, and some people, they'll work till the end. Others, are supposed to work their entire life. And the whole point of the parable is that, that people are called to this spiritual understanding at different points and times in their life. And you can't speed that up. You can only make that worse. And so if there is a God and there's a Holy Spirit, that it actually will talk to that person and tell that person what and when they should change. So this whole idea that Christians are supposed to go out in the world and force people to be like them, that is all man. That all came from man. That has absolutely nothing to do. In fact, if anything, if you ask me, it's a showing of a lack of faith in God. If you believe in God and you're out there trying to force people to be like you and write legislation to make people live like you, then that means that you have no faith. And so I think what I'm seeing from my atheist friends is that they're okay with what anybody believes. They just don't want it in the law, right? They don't want you to force it down their throats. And when you do that,
sure,
then everyone's accepting. When we have basic understandings of free will, that it's your right, then I think people are accepting, and you get to keep your guns over there, then you get to keep your health care over there, and you get to keep this. But even with health care is another good discussion. I think people are now realizing the scam, that they were scammed. They asked for universal health care, and the left asked for universal health care. They got for-profit health care, and the left, who didn't want to pay for it, they still have to pay for it. And so they're both realizing that it's a scam. But even on the right, they understand that, well, you know, universal health care does make sense because more people are dying. It doesn't make sense maybe from a constitutional perspective, but from a the corporations who have been raping and robbing and stealing all the money, invading, if we actually apply the same model we do for universal income, am I saying that right? No.
I think so. Or guaranteed, what, basic income or something?
Yeah, guaranteed basic income. So basically doing what Alaska does, which is you make the corporations pay for being multi-billion-dollar corporations. If someone, but you don't hear these solutions coming from leaders. If they were to say something like, oh, we're going to have universal health care and we're going to print the money to pay for it, you know, because we print the money for tanks and bombs and guns and everything else, you know, because we care about you. But when you need us to print some money for some pills or medical treatment, the left leadership will turn around and run the other way. And so they'll give Trump, and this is what the other screw. I think the whole neocon screw is the left is watching the left leadership give Trump everything he wants when it comes to war. Every dime, $200 and something billion, but won't lift a penny, won't print a penny for any of the things they say are their core values. And so I think people are seeing that.
Yeah, you know, you got into several issues there. Yeah, I mean, one thing that really frustrated me about the Democrats, which I saw through Obama, is a term I use that people always don't like. I call it flaccid advocacy. Like, they just advocate half-heartedly for things, and as soon as a Republican tries to obstruct, they go, "Oh, I'm being obstructed. Sorry, I really want to do this, but can't do it. Sorry." You know. In the meantime, the Republicans can obstruct, and they can do whatever they want. When the Republicans come rolling down the road, the Democrats are like, "Oh, I don't know," or just enough Democrats peel off to vote for what the Republicans want. So after a while, you see the Democrats are kind of frauds both ways. They don't really fight for what they say they want, and then they kind of help the Republicans out when they need a little push over the edge to get what they want, like with the banking deregulation or reduction in regulation recently, or the war, like you say, same thing. You know, something else about healthcare, and you know, I wanted to see single payer or public option. Of course, we didn't get either one. Obama didn't even propose a public option. So, you know, he could have proposed single payer and maybe met in the middle, public option. Who knows? He didn't even ask for anything. Basically, what he asked for is what he got in the end. So, which isn't very good negotiation. But the other thing is, you know, when you see how our healthcare system works, it's not really about health. It's about treatment. You know, whether that's medical treatment or pharmaceutical prescribing and so on. So there's a problem that our so-called medical system is corrupt. And then you say, well, all right, well, do we want to make that a nationalized system? Or would that just end up doing like what the military, or suppressed or harassed, or if they want to try alternate treatments? And so if you think that our healthcare system is corrupted in the sense that it's not really promoting cures and health, then you got to step back and say, well, do we want to nationalize that, or do we need to fix it before we can nationalize it? So that's another example of where, okay, you might have this left approach where you want to socialize something, but if it's not really functional or reliable, then maybe that's not the priority for now. You might say the same about education in some ways. I mean, there's a lot, I think, and I would say credit the right for this. There's a lot to be critical of in public education. I mean, in fact, the kids don't have recess, and so much of it is like indoctrination these days. So then if you can't clean that up, how much more money do you want to throw at it? I mean, it's a tricky process, and I kind of appreciate the right. Although, again, people on the right might complain about that because they don't want to make it public, but they have a legitimate complaint that the quality is bad, And so if I'm on the left, I feel like I have a responsibility on the left to say, well, not just we need to nationalize all this, but I have a responsibility to say, well, we need to make it efficient and accountable if I'm going to ask all my fellow citizens to help fund it. So you can apply that, like I said, to education or to healthcare or whatever. So, and there's another, and this is a whole other tangent, but, we could become healthier if they weren't spraying neurotoxins in the sky. Oh, that won't cost much. We could become healthier if our food wasn't poisonous. I mean, there's so many ways we could become healthier without having national health care. So, You know, when you look at the real big picture, how many ways we're made unhealthy, it's like, well, universal health care would be nice, but we have to really take back society at a fundamental level, you know, and a lot of basic health will come back, you know, if we're able to, you know, take over some of these processes that are corrupt in the corporate world and the food production, you know, whatever, medications and so on, that are making people unhealthy or keeping them from staying healthy. So,
right. And that's a great topic there as well, which is, you know, food has always been medicine, right? When people have healthy food, they're healthy. You know, they don't have these medical problems. They don't need these drugs, you know, but we can't seem to get to a place where the government will allow that. You know, they keep incentivizing these chemical companies and chemical spraying of the food. And so, and that's another thing that I think I do see some understanding is from the holistic people on both sides of the aisle are saying, well, you know, healthcare, the healthcare system didn't break, right? Like that's the understanding. The healthcare system was always designed to run broken. It was always designed to maximize profit. And so between healthcare, big chemical companies, which is funny now because you got Bayer buying Monsanto, and the lines are kind of being blurred where maybe we're starting to see that maybe they all work in cahoots anyway, is that the healthcare system's broke is because they don't try anything preventative. They don't do anything to teach people. You know, they just give you drugs after you have cardiovascular problems. They don't tell you to change your diet. They just keep giving you, what is that, the statin drugs. They just take statin, and instead of changing your diet, keep using the healthcare system, keep using the medicine. And so there's obviously no way that's going to work when people are getting increasingly sick. The food is getting increasingly worse. And so, of course, the whole system designed to blow up. And I think more people are starting to agree, holistic on both sides, that if we actually had a smart government with half a brain, it actually would whittle in healthier living with the healthcare system. So when you get sick, they're teaching you this is what you're supposed to do. But not only that, but maybe you're getting discounts in, you know, on your policies based on how you're eating. What are you buying at the grocery store? Like we have these little grocery store cards now. They know what you're buying. And if you're buying a certain percentage, say raw foods, where it's obvious you're actually cooking and you're trying, that maybe you fit in a different category. And I have a buddy of mine, I don't see him around, but he actually worked in the healthcare industry. And he said just prior to for-profit healthcare coming in, his point was they were already leaning that way, that the healthcare companies, the insurance companies were already leaning towards people who weren't smoking, who were exercising regularly, who had gym membership, and they were giving reductions in the policies based on that. And so I think for-profit healthcare came in because the insurance companies were actually starting to do some of the right things. And so they, you know, it was a big scam, Jasmine just said in the room, wherein they swapped it out. Before we start helping people to get healthier by incentivizing a healthy lifestyle, we got to maximize money. We got to bring in this for-profit healthcare. So I think people are starting to see that's a scam too, and that healthcare is only expensive because we're being ignorant.
Yeah. Boy. So so there's a lot of issues about, you know, if you don't have representative government, well, let me put it this way, if it's not representing the people, then who is it representing? And if it's that corrupted, then if you come from the left and you want the government to solve problems, well, how are they going to solve it? Because they're not working for you to begin with. So it's interesting, and that makes the left, I said, more accountable. And I think, and it gives some arguments to the so-called right about minimal government. So then the right might say, well, all governments are corrupt and you can never do anything. And I like to hope that's not the case. But, you know, this is an example of where we need to have a dialogue. And the left would say, well, we need to make sure the government is accountable and efficient if we want more of it to solve certain problems. Because, you know, I mean, there's so many contexts where we work collectively, right? We have sports teams, we have parishes, we have, you know, different groups. You know, one that inspires me is an orchestra. I mean, look at an orchestra, there's like dozens of people there and they have thousands of hours of experience and they get together and they produce something that just blows your mind sometimes how incredible it is. You know, so I like to say, well, why can't we have a society like that? You know, right. And that's maybe a big vision, and maybe you can't scale that to 300 million people. So that's a reasonable consideration. So that's kind of my ideological view from the left of that cooperation is better than perpetual competition. But if we're going to cooperate at the level of the country, then we have to be more responsible, and we have to be sure that the politicians and the government really are, representing us, and they're responsible, and they're not serving, other interests. So,
right.
So yes, that's part of the conversation that I see where the right and the left are coming together these days.
Right. And then the government, the corruption portions of it too. Like the place I don't see any debate is whether or not, the majority of politicians in Congress are corrupt. They accept that. They know that. They know that they're being bought. They know that they're bought by Wall Street. They know that the big banks are running. Like one of the great things. Oh, another great red pill moment was when they showed that, was it Citigroup or Citibank? With the WikiLeaks released that showed that the email went from Citigroup to John Podesta when Obama, just before, I think a month before the election, his first term, and they picked his entire cabinet except for 2 people.
Well, what I think is interesting about that? You would think, well, why would they send him an email before the election? What if that got out? The public could be outraged. Why wouldn't they wait till after the election and say, okay, here's what we want, And when you think that they sent it before, it's almost like saying, if you don't go along, we'll make sure you're not elected. It's almost like a threat to say, you know what, you're not president yet, so here's what we want, because otherwise you'd think, well, that would be risky if that got exposed, that he got this email. But it was more important to them to tell him before the election, this is what we want.
This is how you treat your slaves, right? That's how you treat your slaves. It's like, listen, you work for us, and if we're going to let you win, you have to agree to this. Here is your cabinet. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happened to Trump. We have to, I think we have to get to a place where we understand how the world works, right? We need to pull our big panties up, as men. We need to pull them up, and we need to accept the fact that our world is corrupt, and money, unfortunately, does run it, and greed runs, both parties and the White House. And the last president that actually fought that, they killed. And so the idea that Trump wasn't also given a similar list or with some sort of threats or bribes or however it worked from the Koch brothers or Soros or whoever any of these people are, it's insanity to think that it would happen to Obama, but it did not happen to Trump.
Well, and the other thing is, besides bribes, what leaks are coming out these days is blackmail is very common. And when you think about it, if you could blackmail somebody, it's a better arrangement than bribery. Because if you're going to bribe somebody, well, it's going to cost you money, and maybe they say, I don't need it. I don't need your bribe. Thanks. But if you got something on them that you can blackmail them, that doesn't cost you anything, number one. And number two, if it's serious enough, they'll go along no matter what. Whereas they might turn down a bribe. And there are more and more leaks and whistleblowers saying that blackmail is very common. Sometimes they entrap people in situations. The old, I'll give you an example. There was in one of the Godfather movies, if you remember, there was a scene where they get called in, and there's a politician who's in bed with a hooker or a young hooker, I guess, and she's dead. And the politician's like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. And the Don says, don't worry, we got it. Well, then later on, when they're testifying before Congress, that politician's like, I can vouch for these people. And when I first saw that, I thought, oh well, he must have killed her. And then later on, I thought, well, maybe someone else killed her, and he was drunk, and they set him up so that he would think he killed her, and then they used that against him. Whereas originally it was like, oh well, he killed her. But maybe he didn't kill her. Maybe he was really drunk. And there are rumors that they do this. They have parties and people are drunk and they get them with someone. Turns out they're underage. Or if you're really drunk, they could have a child with you. And I know this is hard to believe, but it's coming out more and more that a lot of politicians are blackmailed. And some of them may actually be guilty of these things, and they're blackmailed for what they're guilty of, or they're set up and they're entrapped. And that's how they're controlled. So it's a serious issue. Yeah.
And I think it makes perfectly good sense. I mean, to me, it's not a conspiracy theory. It actually is how the mafia works, right? It's how gangs work. It's how clubs work. It's how even Hollywood works. They want to pull you in, and these actors in Hollywood are all using cocaine. And how do they pull you in? They bring you in, and you're going to sit here and snort a line with us, and we all did it together, or you're out. It's how they say that, the whole pedophilia thing works. They'll bring in people and, hey, this is how we get down. We can kill you, throw you over the edge, your career's over, or you partake. And and so we know Congress has always worked that way. But even outside of that, just from an NSA perspective alone, right? They know everything. They know everywhere you've been. They know everyone you've talked to. They know everything going back for years. I've got a friend who worked in Quantico, Virginia, and he explained underneath Quantico, Virginia, there actually was a large mainframe installation that was almost, I think he said something like 2 miles long. And it recorded every single phone call in America. And this was going back into the late 70s, the early 80s, because he was there for an upgrade in the 80s. And so they've been recording everybody for the longest time. I remember, and so they can use that to blackmail you from various things. Blackmail is so easy. But I remember when I worked, and you're an old IT guy, so you remember this too, possibly, but a lot of the corporations I worked for, like, people think that they delete data. They delete almost nothing. They keep every email you've sent. They keep most of your communications. They keep your instant message conversations. It all goes rolled out to tape backup. It all goes on a truck. It goes off to, if it's Iron Mountain or wherever their backup, their backup facility is, and it just sits there. And and the way that I saw things happening is when it came time for you to go, for whatever reason, they'd go and they'd dig into your past. And I think these were mainly for lawsuits, right? They weren't really for a bribery in corporate America, but they were for lawsuits because you get fired, say, I'm going to go get my lawyer, I'm going to sue you. And they say, okay, well, we can go back, 20 years worth of you actually utilizing corporate equipment for illegal activity or unethical things or immoral things, or we've got you and whoever you were cheating on with your husband, or whoever, you were meeting somebody or whatever, or just embarrassing things. And so, but that's how corporate America has worked ever since I've been there. And so the idea that corporate America works that way, the gangs work that way, the mafia works that way, the oligarchs probably work that way, the pedophiles work that way, but all of a sudden politicians don't work that way. It's illogical.
Yeah. Well, you say with gangs, what's one of the sort of standard initiation, quote unquote, is to go kill somebody or commit some crime. Well, okay, now you committed a crime and people know you did it. So now they got something on you that they can use to blackmail you, to make you do whatever else they want. So, yep.
Yep. I remember being a kid growing up in Washington, D.C., or in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. And I remember there was a swimming pool. I want to say it wasn't the kiddie pool, but there was a kiddie pool there and another kids pool. And the goal of the gang initiation was to send the new gang members there to go shoot up a pool full of children.
Jeez.
And this happened, but they do things like this because now they have something on you. Now you're loyal to the gang. You're a blood brother or whatever it is. And this is our government. This is a sick thing. So I think people are really starting to, what used to be conspiracy, I think now is more being accepted in the mainstream. And I think that's the other side of it.
Yeah, I guess along those lines, and this is sort of related, is I think most of us see, especially if you've been red-pilled, that the media, the corporate media is more or less corrupt. I mean, if they're not lying to you, they're just presenting some spectacle to keep your attention away from something that's more important. So either they're telling you nonsense or they're telling you something that's, a porn star or something and not, what's going on in Syria or what have you. So then the question is, well, how do you inform yourself? And it's not that easy, but there are a lot now of leakers and whistleblowers coming out on the web. And any one person, leaker, whistleblower, maybe, you can't necessarily take what they say, but as you get more and more, you can start to collect that information together. And it's almost like basic journalism, or you could say forensic work, right? If you're trying to solve some crime, you take every little scrap of evidence you can find and you put it together and try to get the big picture. And what I'm finding these days is we've talked about some of these things that are more on the red pill side, like pedophilia and things like that, is there is more and more information on the web by leakers and whistleblowers. And it takes a lot of work sometimes to read through them and compare. But if you follow that, you can get a better picture of what's going on in the background. And I think than we've been able to get for a long time. And they're also, there are good aggregators, we say. There are people that have YouTube pages who do that work. who read through stuff and process it and try to make sense out of it and line it up right and find out what corroborates what else. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but it is interesting how you can get a pretty good picture of what's going on behind the scenes if you take enough time on the web to look at leaks and whistleblowing and just corroborate all of it. Just collect as much information as you can.
Right. And the internet, another thing I like to say is they never saw the internet coming, right? The internet is their Achilles heel, because now, a lot of the whole Pizzagate thing came from the right? And a lot of people didn't believe any of that. That's impossible. Our politicians can't be pedophiles. They're better than us. They're our
just like our priests can't be pedophiles, right?
Right, exactly. It's like they're people.
They're priests.
The ministers and the priests and the people. They're just people. They're psychopaths everywhere. But it's just impossible. Our government couldn't do it. But then you go and you start looking at that case in the UK where they caught a lot of these guys in the UK government in these pedophile rings. And this was going back, what was that, 15 years ago or something like that? But the internet, it makes a lot of this information readily available, and it takes something that just seems so ludicrous, and then it makes it more plausible, because you're like, wait a minute, this has never happened before. Our politicians would never get together and and destroy little kids' lives. And then you find out, wait a minute, the UK government, it happened there, and so if it could happen there, this could be a splinter of that, or it could be the same exact thing. And so I don't think they were ready for the internet. The internet came in, and I think that's why you've got all this push for censorship to shut things down and take websites down.
Definitely.
And to take away voices, because the poor people around the world are starting to compare notes. The poor people on the left and the right are starting to compare notes. And I think that's when we're coming to some sort of a climax where poor people are going back to historically, what was it, the Farmers Alliance, when poor people across the board, across all sides, got together and said the railroad tycoons, the plantation masters, the landowners, and the government are all colluding, and they're screwing all of us. And I think we're kind of sliding back to that day.
Yeah, it's interesting about the internet, because if you wanted to be a whistleblower before the internet, or a leaker, you'd have to go to a reporter somewhere, and he's got a job working for the paper. You'd have to convince him, and then he'd have to convince his editor, and then the editor might have to convince William Randolph Hearst, the owner of the paper, and then if they published you, well, now you're like, your whole city or state knows about you, and you're sticking your neck way out there, so there are so many impediments to being a leaker or whistleblower. On the web, you can just go on some blog and say, blah, 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 this happened to me. Now, of course, people can make it up or whatever, but at least the threshold is like all the way down. So, and what you're finding is a lot of people are leaking, and then what happens is they're less intimidated. When one guy sees somebody leak something that he knows about, then he's not like, I'm not the only guy now who's going to talk about this. So it gives him more courage. And so you're getting a lot of leaks and whistleblowers, and from very different directions. Some are from the military, some are from the government, some are from the media, so you're getting all these different sort of triangulating points that are describing sort of similar things, like we're saying, the blackmail and other activities going on in the government. And yeah, they really can't stop it. I mean, they have to shut down the web practically. You can see how they're trying to stop it, and it's almost comical because there's so much. And then what's the alternative? I mean, it's almost like the more there is leaked, then the worse the stuff gets on the news, on the networks. I mean, I used to watch MSNBC, and I just watched them go down year after year, and now they're practically a joke, So, so if the people want to be informed, if they want to be so-called red-pilled, they have to start going on their own and searching it out. And I find that's interesting in a way, because it's kind of like growing up, and this is like our last conversation we had. When we relied on institutional media and news, there's a kind of childish quality, like, well, they're the authorities, and they're going to tell us what's going on. And this is how we know, and this is why the world is the way it's. And once you realize they're lying to you, then it becomes your responsibility to learn about it. And there's kind of a growing up process there. Like, okay, am I going to face whatever it is? Am I going to find out what it is, and I'm going to confront it? Because some of the red pill stuff, it's traumatizing to learn some of this stuff, and we haven't even mentioned some things that I've heard. But it's a kind of growing up. So if we're talking about taking our government back for ourselves and having a really representative government, you say, well, part of that has to be to facing up to the world as it is, and just how much evil or how much criminal activity is out there, and saying, all right, we're going to confront this And even if we have like a truth and reconciliation process, whatever, we're going to be big boys and girls, and we're going to say we know the world as it is, and we want to confront that, and then we want to carry on and take responsibility and take control of our society ourselves.
Right. And another thing that I like to say also is, I don't care if Republicans or Democrats run the country. I don't care if Greens or Independents run. I don't care, as long as they actually live here. And it's not corporations, it's not Wall Street, it's not whoever people say it is. Like that's the, and it's not a nationalistic statement. It is a sustainable local statement. When your neighbors, elect people who are their neighbors, who are responsible for running your neighborhood, then you can have safety. You can have someone who has a vested interest in your country, your state, your town, actually making the decisions. Right now, the left and the right, all of their leadership, and there might be a few who are holdouts, but they have no power, they have no say. They don't make any decisions. Both parties absolutely need to get this money from Wall Street. They need to get it from, the international corporations and the oligarchs or the other nations, anyone who wants to buy America. So those people, they have no skin in the game. They have no vested interest, and they don't care what happens in America. And this is the other reason why, like, I love people for their passion, but we got to guide that passion in the right direction. So things like social justice warriors and Black Lives Matter and White Lives Matter, and these groups that come together, Blue Lives Matter. It's good to be angry about something. It's good to have passion. It's a natural emotion. But if you don't take that and focus that at the people who made sure Black lives don't matter, white lives don't matter, blue lives don't matter, the reason why you feel you need to fight for social justice, if you actually are siding with the people who caused the problem and you're not siding with the other people who are victims of the problem, then you have a real serious problem. To me, either you struggle with the ability to do critical thought, or you're not ingenuous about what you're saying you believe in. Either it's about ego and being right, or it's about fixing the problem you say you care for the most.
And it's funny because when I was thinking about right versus left, and a lot of the differences are exaggerated, but I was thinking about, well, if we could get down to the root of it, are there fundamental differences in some way? Or and there is that aspect of it, like even like right brain and left brain. Some people are more analytical and more disciplined and structured, and some people are more creative and kind of independent minded. And that's kind of a superficial way of looking at the difference between the right and the left. But I heard a saying that people from the left are the kind of people that start businesses, and people from the right are the kind of people that run the business after it gets started. And you need both. So you need this sort of discipline and rigor and kind of strong focus. And again, we're generalizing, but that, for example, I mentioned I've found more people on the right on YouTube, and boy, some of them are so rigorous. They're so meticulous. Like, for example, there's a woman who follows Russiagate, and she knows everything from A to Z about Russiagate. And if I want to find out what's going on here or there, I can really just tune into her. So what I'm getting at is, so maybe that's kind of a quality of the right in a superficial way, but the left can be passionate, they can be creative, they can be humorous. They maybe they can see outside the box sometimes, but maybe they're undisciplined sometimes. So that's an argument for working together. One side is more structured and holds people accountable. The other side is more visionary and passionate and inspiring, and they can both work together, for the same cause.
Right. And I think someone just said in the room, Sandy was talking about speak for us, because we can't necessarily speak for ourselves. I think we all have a role to play. And some of us have big mouths. I have a big mouth. I have a big mouth, and I get emails all day long or messages all day long, things to look in. I go through. I'm trying to speak louder in the mic. People are saying my mic's low, so hopefully this helps. But
I hear you okay.
Okay. I go through my mail. I go through my friends' feeds. I do everything I can to spend more time on pages of people who are saying things different than what I'm used to. And I'll do my best to yell it to the top of the mountaintops, right? Like we have to respect each other. Like Ellen in the room just said, we have to respect each other's rights. We got to respect each other's ability to lead the lives the way they want to live it, and live it, and stop having people at the top of our selectively ignorant groups tell us how somebody else should be living, right? When we stand up for each other, then that's when we can make a difference. You know, divided, nothing will change. And that's the fact that I really want everybody to take home, which is if we keep doing what we've done to get here, nothing will ever end. Understand the issues from their perspective and their life experience, and then start speaking to that. That's how, when we stand up for each other, that's when we're going to get somewhere. But if we keep getting played, which is what we are, we're being played by the same people. They look different. They call themselves Democrats or Republicans, but they're all the same people. And that's kind of where I come in for the best that I can, Carl. You know, I don't know all the information, but I got a lot of friends with tons of information, more than what I could possibly ever read. I get so much mail, I can't keep up with it at all. But I'm appreciative for all of it, and I try to read everything I can that they send me, and I try to watch all their videos and look at the things that are important to them. And that's how we use these platforms like Facebook and YouTube to actually make a difference. You know, you have to use them to connect to communities you would normally never run into.
You know, I can apply that in one example. That actually, this is kind of how you and I first bumped into each other on social media. But let's take the example of, say, white privilege. I'm just going to sort of an inflammatory subject.
Dangerous topic, brother, but I love it.
Well,
let's go there. We can go there anytime.
No. I think you'll like my take on it. I mean,
yeah, I'm pretty vocal on my take on it, so go for it.
Or we could talk about male privilege.
It's all the same topic. It's all the same topic at the root. So go for it. Go, brother.
Well, there's two things. I mean, first of all, if we talk about our government's not representing people, well, then it's not representing whites or blacks. And ultimately, you know, it's representing corporations. You know, so white privilege doesn't reduce that. And at the end of the day, if you want to look for the real privilege, it's privilege of wealth. It's the privilege of power, you know. And if you're a black woman, disabled, lesbian, you know, and you're powerful, then you got privilege. You have money. I mean, now in some situation you might be at a disadvantage. But the thing is, when someone promotes the idea of white privilege, it tends to make people who aren't white resent white people. And then, and the implication of privilege sounds like something you don't deserve. Like, if you're privileged, why are you privileged and I'm not? Yeah. Then the idea is supposed to reduce that, you know. But in fact, you know, we're all being spied on. We're all being surveilled. So there's no privilege there. Nope. So, you know, the police are confiscating property through this so-called civil asset forfeiture, through eminent domain. You know, there are so many ways that we don't have our basic rights, you know, any of us, white or black or male or female. But these narratives of so-and-so's privileges makes everybody else resent that person. But what's the solution then? To drag everybody down to the lowest level of like the least rights and least privilege? To me, the solution is everybody support everyone's rights. Everybody support everyone's, you know, basic constitutional rights, basic human rights, you know, whatever that might be. So if we observe, you know, that African Americans obviously in some situations are still mistreated, say run-ins with police or whatever, the solution isn't to let the police mistreat white people. The solution is is everybody put their foot down and say, this is not acceptable. We're going to raise everyone up to the same level of their basic rights. And that's it. And instead of, because privilege just automatically stokes resentment. Like, why is he privileged and I'm not privileged? You know, when it's not, I don't see so much privilege. I just see different degrees of oppression. So if we just pull everybody up and all work together, you know, it'll subvert this idea that we should always be warring by every kind of axis, which is one thing I don't like about the Democratic Party, that the Democratic Party is setting race against race and gender against gender and sexual preference against sexual preference, you know, and then even in the women's lib movement now, it's the trans against the women. And, you know, it's like it's become so obvious after a while that they're just creating every kind of superficial division to keep people at each other, you know, so they don't recognize the bigger, you know, adversary that they have in society. So, but anyway, so the reason I mentioned that is because to me, the ultimate solution is everybody come together and support everybody's rights, period. And it's very simple and it will galvanize everyone. So,
yeah.
There
So,
you
so
go.
my perspective on privilege, which actually I think that's how I got started doing. No, I think I started earlier with other stuff, but that when I did a video on white privilege, and it went insanely across the internet, at least for what my videos used to. And my perspective on white privilege is my perspective on all privilege. The first question is, who, before we even talk about it, who gave you the concept? That's step one. Do you trust the people who actually gave you this word? That's question one. And if the people who gave you this word benefit from division and destruction, and they're profiting directly on hurting you and your community, then you should already be suspect about that word. Second thing is, if you if you think racism is a bad thing, then you shouldn't use race words in anything that you do. If racism actually is a bad thing and you don't want racial division, the minute you say white, whatever you say next is going to be racist. The minute you say black, whatever you say next, no matter how well mean you're trying to help a community, whatever, it's going to be racist. And you always want to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else when you hear that, right? And so I think I answered the question, when it comes to white privilege, does it exist? I say, I don't want to talk about it, and I don't know, because I'm not white. So I don't know. I don't have any details. I have white friends who can explain that to you, who live that life, who are honest, and I trust. They say it does. I go along with that. But more importantly, does black privilege exist? And it does. I grew up and I saw it the whole time. If you were light skinned and you were black, you got first in line. You got the best of this. You were treated different. If you were like, I'm disappearing right now, Brother Carl, because the sun is going down. I'm slowly fading into nothing, the nothingness. But if you
I
had,
see, as long as you keep smiling.
yeah, and if you had dark skin, the light skinned blacks treated you like you were dirt for the most part.
Well,
And so, but that goes all the way back to the plantation. So the way I see it is everybody has some kind of privilege, right? And what everyone does is they utilize their privilege to the best of their abilities. I had parent privilege. I had a good father, good mother. They got me in school. They loved me. They took care of me. They fed me. And so I have this privileged suburban upbringing that a lot of white kids didn't have, right? So I feel wrong to use that word, knowing that right up the street where I grew up, there were very poor white families. And for me to throw in their face that, one, I know the people who gave that to me caused all the problems for the communities that are listed. Two, what is the end game? What is that actually going to solve? What is it going to fix that I make an enemy of other poor people who have a slightly different privilege than I do? It's just going to make things worse. So why would I want to hand that much more power to the people who cause the problems and make an enemy of somebody who caused me no problems? It's a completely illogical word. I don't know why it exists. I don't know why people use it. They perhaps don't look at who gives it to them. It stirs up trouble. And so anyway, in terms of privilege, I have a lot of privilege, and I use my privilege to the best of my ability to right all the wrongs that I see. And what other people use their privilege for, I don't say anything about. And the last thing I say on that, I have friends who are in Africa right now who are European as the day is long. And I sit there and I watch videos of them building houses. I watch videos of them teaching kids English. I watch videos and see pictures of them using white privilege, if that's what it is, or if it was suburban privilege, or if it was whatever privilege they got. They're using it to help people. So if it exists, God bless it. I hope it does. I hope it does. And I hope it lands in the right people's spot. If you have black privilege, I hope you have it, and I hope you use it to help people. If you've got education privilege. So my position on privilege is, I know everybody has privileges. Everybody has all different types of privileges. The question is, how are you using them? And there'll never be a world where we're all equal, right? If you're handicapped, somebody else to you has mobility privilege. Are they using that to help your community and look out for you, or are they using that to get a one up and hurt you? So I had, and so, Brother Carl, I ran my mouth, and I came full circle in a thought, and my full circle in this thought is, if white privilege exists, I hope it's powerful. I hope it is powerful, because I have a lot of white friends who I know love me, they love my kids, they love the communities I grew up in, and they love the world. And I know they'll use it the right way.
See, that the complaint I have is the word privilege, because you gave an example that you grew up in a suburban sort of environment, and your life was easier in a certain sense than somebody from like a poor urban environment. But if someone calls that privilege, it makes it sound like you didn't deserve that, and that's not fair. And what's the solution to that? To make your life harder? You know, it's like, no. Everybody should have the kind of life you have. So let's all help the people who are less privileged. But I don't even want to say that. Let's raise everybody up.
Exactly.
The word privilege makes resentment towards people that are higher than you, even when they just have an ordinary middle class life. Like, why resent that? Just instead pull everybody else up. So be sympathetic towards people who are struggling instead of resentful toward people who aren't struggling. You know,
Right.
so and that's why the word privilege means like kind of sinister, because it makes you resent anybody that's doing better than anyone else instead of sympathetic for the people that need help. You know, and the tendency would be to just drag everybody down instead of lift everybody up. You know, so
Well, it's tribal. It's tribal in nature. Because it is racist, and it's a racist term. It's intended to have a tribal response in the people who already have a problem with that community, and it's supposed to rally them together and fight the other side, and by the people who are screwing both sides. So you're right. The words are very selective. They select them very carefully, and they know that they'll have a psychological response in people who don't know what actually is happening in this world. Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, literally, privilege is something that you don't deserve. That's basically what it means. It means you got something that you really didn't deserve, but you know, somebody's giving it to you. Well, you know, if you're not getting beaten by the police, that's not really a privilege. Like, nobody should get beaten by the police.
Right, exactly.
So, you know, let's make sure nobody is, instead of saying, well, why aren't you being beaten? You should be beaten too. You know? So anyway, I'm beating this subject too much. But yeah, so it's like you say, it's the term privilege. It just provokes a kind of resentment right there. And then people stop thinking about, well, what's really the difference here? And how should we resolve that difference, you know? So.
Right. And Ty just mentioned the Tulsa riots and any riots and any fights, right? It separates communities. It brings them to positions of yelling and screaming and escalation and anger. At the end of the day, people go to prison. And so who wins? You know, we all lose. We all lose. And we got to be smarter than that. I think, you know, all of this, it's not checkers. This is all chess. These people have been putting, and Ty is good on this. These people have been putting this game together for a long time. They've been planning on screwing poor people for a very long time. They made sure they had both parties, all the politicians who were in the right spots in their pockets. And so we can't continue to play Neanderthal type games. And I know that's the wrong word, because Neanderthals, their brain were bigger than ours, but that's a whole nother discussion, you know. But we have to stop acting and, you know, reacting and start thinking. That's where we got to get to. We got to stop these knee-jerk reactions to how things look, how we perceive them to be, and accept how they really are. And that's the only way we change anything, you know, if we truly do have the passions we say we do. Uh-oh. I don't hear anything. Are you?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, okay.
Just saying I agree. I'm going to have to wrap it up soon, but it's been good to talk about all this.
Yeah, well, you know what? No, it was an awesome discussion, brother, and I certainly appreciate it. Maybe we'll take a last couple look at a few comments in the room and then wrap it up. I don't know if there are any comments that you found that you want to address. I know Brother Hamo came in the room a little late, and he said ordinary people do not have privilege because privilege means a special and extra right. That is something the wealthy have, which I agree with. I agree with 1,000%. I think ordinary people, they're basically born with nothing. And, You know, whatever their parents can get them, their parents get them. But ordinary people, they don't have any special privilege up above and beyond. But it's like you said, they use words to really piss people off. They use words to tap into your Cro-Magnon anger and passion and survival instinct and to get you to fight. And we got to be smarter than that. We got to evolve to not be so playable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, all right. Well, yeah. I don't know. I said, do you see anything you wanted to address, or are we going to wrap it up? Industry. It has become an industry, and it's a thriving industry because both sides keep it thriving. I know people don't like, what was it, when Morgan Freeman who said it? You know, he said, you want racism to go away? He said, stop talking about it. Stop feeding it. Stop making it a topic. Stop making it viral. When it goes on the news, turn it off. You know, we build it up into a business and it's thriving. And so it gets worse and worse and we're feeding the monster. And if we keep feeding the monster, it'll never go away.
Yeah, I think we all just have to get together and support everyone's rights, just period. You know, it doesn't matter race or whatever else. I mean, if you look at how the country was founded, the Constitution pretty much lays it all out, you know. So you don't have to elaborate on that in terms of race or color or gender or anything. Just make sure everybody's got their full rights. And I think it's smooth sailing after that, and instead of fighting each other over stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And that's kind of my libertarian background, you know, which is believing in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And I'm not a scrap the Constitution person. I think that they were close. I think they screwed up when it came to women. They screwed up when it came to other nationalities. They screwed up in defining who a man, you know, was. They screwed up probably with children, but they were pretty close. And that's why I'm not a throw the Constitution away type person. We just need to fill some cracks. Like, this is not a time to start over at square one. I think this is a time to look at the Constitution, figure out how corporations slipped in the cracks, how the politicians slipped in the cracks, how the genderist and racist and the sexist and all these people slipped in the cracks and screwed it up for everybody else. And we plug those holes. You know, that's significantly easier and quicker than going back to board one and starting all over.
Yeah, and I'm thinking more just the basic rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You know, those basic rights, speech, and everything else, which obviously they're all being encroached upon. So, and I agree. You know, from those rights, we have differences, or they didn't fulfill certain responsibilities, as far as, for example, you know, freedom for everybody. But so when I think about that, I'm speaking of just the basic rights, which, you know, here are these people, they're under the British government's control, right? And they're being oppressed and they want to be independent. And the first thing they did is they said, well, okay, we don't have a country yet. We're not in it, but we think we have a right to make a country or to be free because of these basic rights that all humans have. So the first thing they did before they had a government is they said, well, what are the rights that all humans have, inalienable rights? And based on that, we're not getting that from our government, and based on that, we're going to separate and form a new government. And so I think I was speaking more to this basic sense of, you know, human rights and so on, and supporting that.
Well, I'd spot on, and I agree with you, brother. And I know you got to run, so I'm going to let you get out of here.
Okay.
You know, so I definitely appreciate you coming on. Appreciate all your wise words. I definitely appreciate you doing everything you can, talking to our brothers and sisters on the right and the left. So hopefully we can get them to stick, you know, effectively what I see this family that's coming together, people who are just, they're finger stickers. They're sticking their fingers down the throats of people who swallowed the blue pill. They joined the left, they joined the right, or they were born into it, trying to get them to vomit up that blue pill so they can actually swallow that red pill, so they can have that red pill moment and realize that they are being controlled and they're being walked into destroying, you know, not only our country, our rights, our kids' future, and our world. And so now is the time to vomit up these blue pills, swallow the red pill, and go talk to someone who's different from you and find out who they are, and then speak about it to your community. We can take a world back in a day. Honestly, if everyone talked to someone else, we could take a world back in a very short period of time. But you got to want to. You got to have enough love for people you don't know to actually step out and talk to them and listen to their perspective. So, Brother Carl, I appreciate you coming on. I'll let you go. I know I held you late. Everybody, thank you for joining.
That's all right.
Appreciate the comments. We always go back and read the comments. So you guys have enjoyed the rest of your weekend, and hopefully we'll have Brother Carl back to talk about some crazy conspiracy stuff at another time. We haven't had any fun discussions in a while. Things have been hot and heavy. So
all I can say is the rabbit hole's deep, and I haven't even gotten to the bottom of it yet. So
it is. Oh, it's so deep.
For another day.
All right, brother. You have a good night now. And everyone else,
all right, take care, everybody.
Love y'all. Bye-bye.
You guys.